I shouldn't even be telling this. But that's how it started. So sudden, so quiet, that I didn't realize I was already too deep until her hand brushed mine. It was supposed to be just another late afternoon in the university library. I wasn't anyone special. Just a 22-year-old trying to get through exams with too little sleep and too much coffee. She carried a presence that made the air shift when she walked in. Professor Hale. Everyone whispered about her. How strict she was, how untouchable she seemed. Late 40s, confident, the kind of woman who didn't need to raise her voice to silence a room. She wore her authority like a second skin. But that day, she wasn't at the front of the lecture hall. She was standing in the quiet stacks of the library, alone, flipping through a book as if the whole world had left her behind. I didn't mean to stop. I only glanced because she was humming softly, a sound too warm for the cold silence of the shelves. And she looked up. Our eyes caught for maybe a second too long. "You should be studying," she said, a faint smirk on her lips. I stammered something about research, though I can't remember what. My mouth moved, but my head was full of the way her hair caught the light through the window, like the dust in the air was drawn to her. She didn't dismiss me. Instead, she tilted her head, almost curious, and asked what I was working on. I tried to explain, words tumbling out faster than I wanted. She listened, really listened, but her eyes lingered, not just on the book in my hands, but on me. The silence between sentences grew heavier. When she finally spoke again, her voice dropped, low and unhurried. "You're nervous." "I'm not," I started, then laughed under my breath because it was too obvious. My hand tightened on the edge of the desk. Her smile didn't break, but her gaze softened, like she was reading something between the lines I hadn't written. Then, without warning, she stepped closer, reaching past me for a volume on the shelf. The brush of her sleeve against my arm sent a shiver up my skin. Too close, too deliberate. I told myself it meant nothing, that I was imagining the pause, the way her fingers lingered on the spine of the book before she pulled it free. But when she turned, she didn't move back. "You're better than you think," she murmured. Her words landed heavier than they should have. She didn't mean my coursework. I knew it, and I think she knew I knew. Before I could answer, footsteps echoed down the hall. She glanced past me, quick and sharp, then back at my face. In that instant, she reached out and pushed the door beside us. An old study room, and stepped inside, waiting just long enough for me to follow before she closed it softly behind us. The click of the lock was louder than it should have been. My chest tightened. I turned to her, searching for something. An explanation, maybe, or a mistake in what I thought I just heard. But she was already closer, the distance between us thinning with every heartbeat. Then she whispered, her voice low enough to make the walls themselves lean in. "Your real exam starts now." I froze. That whisper still hung between us, heavier than the locked door behind my back. It wasn't just her words, it was how she said them, like they weren't meant for a student at all, like they were meant for me and me alone. I tried to laugh it off, to say something casual, but the sound caught in my throat. She was still looking at me, steady, waiting, her hand resting against the table like she was keeping herself anchored. "This is dangerous," I finally managed. Her lips curved, though not into the confident smirk I was used to. This time it was smaller, almost uncertain. "You think I don't know that?" The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was thick with everything we weren't saying. I could hear the faint hum of the old radiator in the corner, the soft creak of the wood under our shoes. The air itself seemed to press closer. I noticed things I shouldn't have, the faint tiredness in her eyes, the way her shoulders sloped like she'd been carrying something heavy for too long. She wasn't just the untouchable professor right then. She was a woman who looked like she needed to be seen. "You don't have to do this," I whispered. Her head tilted, as though the words surprised her. "You think I'm using you?" I hesitated. That wasn't what I meant, but my voice betrayed me. I think you're lonely. The word landed harder than I'd expected. For the first time since I'd known her, she broke eye contact. She turned slightly, fingertips grazing the edge of the bookshelf like she needed something to hold on to. My husband left last year, she said, barely audible. Most people assume I'm fine, that I want to be left alone. But quiet, it gets loud sometimes. I swallowed. I hadn't expected her to hand me something that raw. She wasn't supposed to trust me with it, not here, not like this. And yet, I couldn't stop watching the way her hands trembled just slightly before she crossed her arms to hide it. Inside, I was split in two. One part of me wanted to step back, to remind myself of the lines, the rules. The other part wanted to step closer, to answer the vulnerability she'd just given me with my own. You don't look fine, I said before I could stop myself. You look like someone who needs more than silence. Her eyes snapped back to mine, sharp, searching. My breath caught. I thought I'd gone too far. But instead of anger, something else flickered across her face. Something softer, something dangerous. She closed the space between us by a step, then another. Close enough now that I could smell her perfume, faint and warm, like jasmine after rain. Her hand brushed against my arm. Barely a touch, but enough to send a shiver through me. Stay a little longer, she murmured. And I knew then that leaving was no longer an option. Her hand on my arm lingered longer than it should have. Just a brush, but enough to root me in place. I should have stepped back. I should have said something safe, something that built a wall again. Instead, I stayed. Her eyes, God, the way she looked at me, were softer now, stripped of the armor she usually wore in class. She wasn't the professor who commanded silence from 100 students. She was just her. And in that quiet study room, she let me see it. I don't usually, she began, but her voice trailed, unfinished. She pulled her hand back, pressing it against her own wrist like she was afraid of what it had just done. I leaned in before I could stop myself. You don't have to explain. That was the truth. I didn't need her to justify anything. Still, the words seemed to catch her off guard. She blinked, and for a second I thought she might actually say what was behind her silence. But then, a sharp vibration broke through the air. Her phone. She startled, fumbling it out of her pocket. The sound seemed twice as loud in the locked room. My chest tightened as she glanced at the screen, her lips tightening. She didn't answer right away, just stared. Is it him? I asked before I could think better of it. Her eyes flicked up to mine, sharp, almost accusing, but then softened. No, it's just the department. She silenced it, setting the phone down on the desk between us, face down like she couldn't bear to see it. The silence that followed was heavier now, laced with everything that had almost been said. I shifted, forcing myself to breathe, to remind myself of where we were, who she was. You don't have to keep me here, I said, trying for distance, for control. But she only tilted her head, a faint shadow of a smile tugging at her lips. Don't you want to stay? And I did. God, I did. That was the problem. Every instinct told me this was wrong, that I'd regret it, but my body betrayed me, leaning forward when I should have leaned away, watching the way her fingers brushed absently over the table as if they were searching for mine. You're playing with fire, I whispered, voice low. Maybe, she said softly. Then, after a pause, almost to herself, but at least I'd feel something. The air between us grew taut, fragile. I could see the pulse at her throat, quick, uneven. My own hands curled into fists at my sides, fighting the urge to reach for her. A knock rattled the door. We both froze. My heart leapt into my throat. Whoever it was, they waited only a second before walking away, footsteps fading down the hall. When the silence returned, it was different, charged, almost unbearable. She looked at me, eyes wide, searching, as if the knock had stripped away the last of her defenses. And I I nearly said it. The words hovered at the edge of my tongue, reckless and unprepared. I want you. Instead, what came out was a shaky breath. Her gaze flicked to my lips, just for a heartbeat, before snapping back to my eyes. We were one move away from crossing the line neither of us could take back. The knock on the door should have been our wake-up call, a reminder to step back, breathe, pretend nothing was happening. But instead, it left us standing closer than ever, both of us locked in a silence that felt more dangerous than words. Her hand hovered just above the table, fingers flexing like she couldn't decide whether to reach for me or retreat. My chest rose and fell too fast, and the only sound in the room was the faint hum of the radiator. Finally, I broke. I can't pretend I don't feel this. The words spilled out before I could stop them. My voice cracked on the last word, betraying more than I wanted her to know. Her eyes widened, not with shock, but with recognition, like she'd been waiting for me to say it. Slowly, carefully, she set her hand flat on the desk, close enough that all it would take was a twitch of my fingers to touch her. "You think I don't?" she whispered. That admission hit me harder than any lecture, harder than any exam. My throat tightened. The room seemed smaller, the air hotter. Every rule, every line I'd been taught to respect burned away under the weight of her words. But she wasn't finished. Her voice dropped lower, raw, vulnerable. "I wake up and wonder if I'll ever feel alive again. Then you walk in, and it's like the world remembers me." I should have said something steady, something kind. Instead, my honesty came rushing out, clumsy and desperate. "You make me forget I'm supposed to be scared." Her lips parted slightly. She blinked as if I'd given her a truth she wasn't prepared to hear. The silence stretched between us, trembling like a wire pulled too tight. I shifted forward, just enough that the edge of my sleeve brushed hers. She didn't move away. Her breath caught, soft, but sharp enough that I felt it in my chest. And then, she looked at me in a way I'd never seen before. Not as her student. Not as someone she should protect from lines and consequences. Her question, "What happens if we don't stop?" still echoed in my head when the twist came. We hadn't moved, hadn't touched, yet the distance between us felt as fragile as glass. "Because I didn't want you to leave." The words punched the air from my chest. She could have said anything else, denied, dismissed, pretended. But she chose truth, and it shifted everything. I took a slow breath, stepping closer, though my body shook with the weight of it. "So what are we doing?" She looked down, her thumb brushing against the edge of the phone, restless. "I don't know. I've told myself you're just a student, that I can draw the line. But then I catch myself watching you, listening too closely, hoping you'll stay after class." My heart hammered so loud I wondered if she could hear it. For weeks I'd thought I was the only one losing control, the only one walking out of her lectures more tangled than before. But now, "You feel it too," I whispered. Her silence was answer enough. And yet, before either of us could close the last inch, another sound cut through. The faint click of a latch outside, followed by a shuffle of steps. Someone was checking rooms. Her head whipped toward the door, panic flashing in her eyes. Without thinking, I moved closer, instinctively placing myself between her and the sound, as if that could shield her from what discovery would mean. The footsteps passed, fading, but the tension remained, pulsing like a second heartbeat. Her gaze came back to me, softer now, almost breaking. "If they find out, I lose everything. And if they don't?" I asked, my voice low, steady. Her lips parted, a dozen words on the edge, but only one came out. "Then it's only us." The room seemed to shrink with that admission. My pulse thundered. I wanted to reach for her. I wanted to cross the line completely. But all I could do was stand there, staring at her, as if a single wrong move would decide both our futures. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was a question neither of us knew how to answer. Her words, "Then it's only us," still rang in my ears as I stood frozen in that little study room, heart pounding like it wanted out of my chest. I'd spent weeks convincing myself what I felt for her was just admiration, infatuation, something that would fade. But hearing her confess, hearing her let herself break the rules, even for a second, shook me. "We can't keep circling this," I whispered, my throat tight. "Either we walk away, or we admit it." Her eyes closed briefly, as if the choice itself hurt. When she opened them again, they glistened with something I'd never seen in her before. Not the sharpness of authority, not the distance of a teacher. Just her. Bare, uncertain. "Do you think I don't lie awake at night, telling myself this can't happen?" she said, her voice unsteady. "That you deserve someone uncomplicated? That I should be stronger than this?" Her words should have pulled me back, but instead, they drew me closer. I took one step, then another, until I was close enough to see the faint tremor in her hands. "You don't get it," I said, my voice shaking. "You're not some forbidden fantasy to me. You're the first person who's ever really seen me." She inhaled sharply, as though the truth of that cut deeper than she expected. For a moment, we just stood there, breathing the same charged air, two lives balanced on a fragile edge. Then she whispered, almost to herself, "If I cross this line, there's no going back." My heart was in my mouth. "Then don't cross it alone." The silence that followed felt endless, but in it, something shifted. Her shoulders lowered, her hand, hesitant, trembling, rose and finally touched mine. Not in passing this time. Not an accident. She let it stay. Her fingers threaded between mine like it was the most dangerous thing she'd ever done. "I don't know where this goes," she admitted. Her voice cracked, breaking the last of her walls. "But I'm tired of pretending I don't want it." I squeezed her hand, grounding us both. "Then let's stop pretending." The room felt different after that. Not safer, not easier, but real. The rules, the risks, the fear, they hadn't vanished. But we weren't hiding behind them anymore. She looked at me with something like wonder, something like regret, and for the first time, she didn't try to control it. She leaned closer, just enough that her forehead brushed mine. It wasn't a kiss. Not yet. But it was a promise. Fragile, dangerous, impossible to take back. When she finally pulled back, her voice was a whisper against the silence. "Whatever happens after this, we'll face it together." And with that, the line we'd spent so long dancing around wasn't just blurred. It was gone. When we finally stepped out of that study room, the air in the hallway felt different. Lighter, yet charged with everything we had just crossed. We didn't speak at first. Our steps echoed down the corridor, the silence between us no longer awkward, but alive. For weeks, we'd circled one another like shadows, her hiding behind her authority, me behind my hesitation. That night, in the quiet of that locked room, something broke open. Not just rules or fear, but the parts of us that had been kept in silence. I kept waiting for her to regret it, to retreat into the armor of Professor Hale again. But as we reached the heavy doors leading out of the library, she slowed. Her hand brushed mine, this time not by accident, not fleeting. She laced her fingers with mine in a small, defiant gesture. "You realize what this means?" she said softly. I nodded. "That nothing goes back to the way it was." Her eyes searched mine, steady but vulnerable. "And you're not afraid of that?" I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. "I'm terrified, but I'd rather be afraid with you than safe without you." That broke something in her. The sharpness in her gaze melted, replaced by something warmer, something she'd fought to keep buried. For the first time, she leaned in fully, closing the space between us. Her lips touched mine. Not rushed, not reckless, but deliberate. A choice. The kiss wasn't fireworks. It was deeper than that. It was two people finally allowing themselves to be honest. When she pulled back, she rested her forehead against mine, her voice barely above a whisper. "Then we'll face it. Together." And I believed her. We walked out into the night air, hand in hand. The campus was nearly empty, lamplight stretching shadows across the pavement. The world outside hadn't changed, but we had. I thought of the first time I saw her in the library, how she carried herself like nothing could touch her. Now I knew better. She wasn't untouchable. She was human, flawed, lonely, hopeful. And maybe that was why I couldn't walk away. For her, it wasn't about finding someone younger or breaking rules. For me, it wasn't about chasing the impossible. It was about being seen. Two people daring to admit that behind the walls and masks, what they needed was each other. There would be consequences. There would be questions. But in that moment, none of it mattered as much as the hand that didn't let go of mine. Because sometimes the bravest thing you can do isn't to follow the rules. It's to admit your heart.